we're going to go ahead and get started. So but before we put on the slides, I want to just thank everyone for being here. I want to thank the Progress Iowa staff. We have our press team, Sam Upaw, Catherine Kuckelman, who will be on the presentation today. We have Ivy, our wonderful digital director, who will be doing our wonderful tech today. We have our messaging director, who makes a lot of our things possible here, Katie Siddle, and our wonderful partnerships director, Amy Adams. So thank you all for being on our team, which I think we do great work, and all of you are here to help make our work better and keep doing this. So thank you so much for being here with us today. Ivy, I'll have you start the slides and we will get started with our presentation on how to give a good interview to the press and be interviewed by them and learn some good tips and tricks. All right. So, excuse me. We have some goals here at Progress Iowa that we always want to do. We want to create a community where Iowans can come together. We want to connect progressive voices from across the state. So that's why we ask people to put their information in the chat so we can see just how across the state we are. We want to empower folks on the ground and their organizing efforts, individuals that are doing this work. And that's why we provide trainings and tools like this so everyone can feel empowered to keep doing this work and amplifying their messages. And we want to provide, like I said, just trainings, toolkits, resources, all of which you will get in a follow-up email from this. We will have this is recorded, like I said, so we will have it on our YouTube. I will send out a copy of this slide deck, and any materials that you need, like message guides and other resources, will be linked in this follow-up email, so you all have it available to you. So yeah, thanks for being here today. We're gonna go ahead and go to the next slide on how did you get here today, right? You probably, if you were at our last training, we talked about how to organize an in-person event an in-person event or a training or any kind of event. And part of that was getting people from the press to that event, if it was supposed to be a rally or some event that you wanted media coverage. And now this kind of brings it back to, how do you talk to the media now that you have them at your event and you want to get that message across and get that amplified and get that coverage? And so some of you have seen this on social media and wanted to join. Some of you are in a group and you want to be able to represent that group well when you talk to people and get press, not just only press, but people too. It's a short, you want to get that message out to everyone. And if you've ever been asked to get interviewed, I've been asked to get interviewed. A lot of you have, if you're a leader in your group or community. Sometimes I get a little nervous and I wonder if I did a good interview. And so this is what part of this is about. And so if you want to learn it, or if you're here, you want to learn more about tips and tricks on how to give a good interview to the press in general, it's always a good refresher and it's always a good thing to just keep up on. And so our next slide on how to prepare to get interviewed. Just know who's going to interview you. If you have one that's scheduled and you've reached out to press, you'll know. So like if Amy has contacted me due to because there's something going on in our community, she wants to interview me, and let's say I didn't know her, I'd probably do a little quick Google search, see where who she works with. She'd probably already told you that, but you can look at history, kind of see what kind of material they did, get comfortable if that helps you and your nerves, because I'm a nervous person sometimes when I get ready for an interview. So knowing the background really helps me. I look up that source, and I also try to find out, make sure that if it wasn't made clear what kind of interview this will be, if it's going to be like a live TV or live coverage on Facebook stream or something, whatever it might be, you want to make sure how to prepare the best for one of those, or if it's going to be in a coffee shop, so you can have a newspaper interview, right? So just knowing what you're gonna get prepared for. And then when you're getting prepared, using talking points ahead of time is going to be really helpful, and it's really going to be helpful to get your point across. And I'm going to expand much more on the talking points and message guides later, but it's going to be strong and data driven, which really helps get that amplified. And when you're talking about it, not only using those talking points, but connecting it back to that personal story on why are you there? And interviewers, press are going to ask you, why are you doing this work? And, you're obviously going to have an answer that's probably personal to you or somebody and that has affected you. And using that story really resonates and not only helps bring that story to life for the person who's interviewing you in the press, but when the press covers it, it makes people relate and resonate with what you're saying, because, you know, it's relatable. So you want to do that. And then that helps explain your goal and mission of like why you're doing the work, for whatever cause, whatever group, whatever issue it is for. And my extra personal tip is have a water or beverage. I have some apple juice with me right now. You never want your throat to be scratchy. You don't want to cough. That's just my personal tip and trick. And so now we're going to talk about why using strong language is so important. And I don't mean the strong language that some of y'all might be thinking. We're not going to be swearing up and down, but we're going to be using good talking points and data-driven messaging. Message guides are going to be very important. They get tested. They, you know, we get polls back if you're an organization like us at Progress Iowa who uses data-driven messaging, and we can really test and make sure that it's going to like be a strong message that relates well and resonates to folks. And so like proven messaging is always the way to do it. And so it's not only us, but, you know, like Planned Parenthood, ISEA, unions, you want to take the lead on whatever issue that you are advocating for. Take those leaders and those experts language and bring that into what your explanation is, because you want to really connect that and amplify that strong language, because it's proven to be good, right? So you want to make sure you use it. So I'm going to have Ivy click into our Iowa Voices as an example of what we have to use. And as it loads, you'll be able to see that this is one of our websites, Iowa Voices, and you can see that there's message guides, social media guides, and training. So if you click into message guides, we have a bunch of different ones on, on Roe versus Wade, on gun safety, on how politicians vote and how to talk about that. And so having these prepared talking points not only will make your story stronger, but it's also, you know, data driven. And so I just wanted to make sure that y'all all saw that. I will send a link to that in the email as well. We can click out of that and go back into the slides, but I wanted to make sure that you saw that we have a lot of data-driven messaging. And it's not only us. If you're a part of a group, reach out and ask if they have prepared talking points, because a lot of communications teams have that, so that way people can talk to people in like a public facing way. And so now I'm going to pass it off to my trusty press secretary, Catherine.
Hello, everyone. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the message guidance Sam was talking about. Our messaging director, Katie Siddall, has done an awesome job of putting together all those guides, and she's got a really great formula down that I think we can share with you to make your message get across better. So, and I mentioned at the top, with the talking points as well, it can be a good way to get back on track if you get lost during your interview. And I don't think it's a bad thing to have a piece of paper in front of you when you're doing an interview, just to make sure you have all the information you will need. So a little bit about this formula that Katie has used. So you start with the shared value statement, and then I have these examples down here, 2 examples. So that shared value statement might be something like, Iowans take pride in working hard and helping each other, but it's getting tougher to take care of ourselves as the cost of everything keeps rising. Or no matter our income or where we live, most Iowans value the freedom to access safe and legal abortion protected by Roe v. Wade. This is a good way to kind of show the common ground between Iowans. This is something we all can get on board with, all care about, and you're just helping to amplify that. The next part is to name the problem and to find the opposition. So always naming, who's standing in the way of this goal that you're trying to reach. And in our case, normally it is Republicans like Ashley Hinson or Governor Reynolds in these examples. The example on the left is Ashley Hinson voting against a cap on insulin prices. So showing, she had the chance to help those with diabetes and help them save money for their needed medication, but she voted against it. The example on the right, Governor Reynolds says she cares about the health of Iowans, that she's pro-life, but instead of actually helping us keep our fundamental rights, she wants to get rid of them. And then another important thing is to not repeat the opposition, even to negate. So if, Governor Reynolds said something crappy about her pro-life stance, don't repeat it. Just say, she doesn't support the same things we do. And then the good way to end things is to provide the tangible outcomes and with a call to action, show that there's something that we can do, that we should do, that we are doing that's going to help bring about this change that you're looking for. So on the left, we need leaders who will stop price gouging and support Iowans in need. On the right, we can hold Governor Reynolds accountable and advocate for comprehensive health care. We can elect leaders who will improve public health. So that just kind of shows what we're either like calling for people to do or what we're already doing and how we can use your support. And we'll go to the next slide. So this is a little bit more about how to answer the questions during your interview, and Sam kind of touched on these before. My first piece of advice is to make it conversation. I know it may feel a little bit scary or like you're in a job interview, but really you're just having a conversation with that journalist. So just talk to them like you would to your friend or your parent or someone. And Sam mentioned it's important to share a story. Journalists are always looking for how something impacts everyday Iowans, and you sharing your story is the best way to show that. And it doesn't have to be, the worst thing that's ever happened to you. It doesn't have to be super emotional. It doesn't have to be crazy, but just showing how that thing connects to you or why it's important to you will make it have more of an impact. Avoid one-word answers. If someone's asking you a yes or no question, don't just say yes or no, because that's not going to make it into a story, or on TV, it's not a good sound bite. And so one good way to avoid that is to restate the question in your answer. So the example I have here is if they asked you, do you think Governor Reynolds fights for working families? You wouldn't just say no. You would say, I don't think she fights for working families, and then explain, she's provided wealthy corporations handouts, tax cuts, she's fought against employment benefits for working Iowans, that kind of thing. So that's a good way to avoid the yes or no trap. And then I have one more slide to go over. If you're going to an interview, these are just some terms you should know. This is like a very basic overview, but on and off the record are important to know. On the record, obviously anything you've said and discussed is fair game to be printed in a story. If something is off the record, that the journalist knows that it is not okay to be printed in the story. Just making sure that when you are chatting with a journalist, you make that explicit. An embargo, that means that information can be published, but you have a certain day or time when that can go live. So you may send something to an outlet and say, I'm having this event at this day. We want you to publish it, but not until tomorrow at noon. And then exclusive basically means that one reporter or one media outlet is going to publish a story. No one else will be able to publish it. You should not share the story with another outlet either. And that is all from me. So I'll turn it back to Sam.
Sam, I think you're on mute.
Okay, well, now I'm off mute. Thank you, because now I can redo this. Hi. So thank you so much, Catherine. And now we get to join my wonderful, friend and I would say Waterloo colleague, reporter. We've had a great relationship here, and Amie Rivers is with Iowa Starting Line, and I really appreciate her time being here. I've been able to get to know her over the years in working in politics and having her cover different things, reading her material, and she has a amazing background, and I want her to be able to share this with you guys on how to, how she prepares going into an interview and how to help you guys get ready to get interviewed by her or somebody else in the media. So I'll pass it off to you, Amie.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you to Catherine as well. Thank you, Amie, and thank you, Progress Iowa, for having me. For those of you who I haven't interviewed before, and I know that I have, Tucker, I see you, obviously Sam, Catherine, probably several others. My name is Amie Rivers. I'm a reporter, local journalist, writer, whatever label you like. For a decade and a half, I worked for the Courier, which is a newspaper covering Northeast Iowa. And I also spent a few years at TV station KWWL, which covers Eastern Iowa. I worked on the online part. I wasn't on camera. Since March, I've actually now been a reporter with Iowa Starting Line, covering issues and policies from a working class perspective, labor unions and how they intersect with politics, mostly across the state. My favorite part of being a journalist is telling the stories of Iowans, whether it's sharing their accomplishments or bringing attention to their struggles. I think journalism is a really vital way to remind us that we're a community that functions best on understanding each other. And the best way to tell someone's story is to hear directly from them through an interview. Something I have slowly and sometimes painfully learned to do better nearly every day of my working life. Not everyone I've interviewed has been interviewed before. In fact, most people I talk to haven't or aren't on a regular basis. They're understandably nervous about what they should say to me or about what I'll do with that information. So if I can help folks understand what I do, what kinds of things I'm looking for in an interview, and how you can help me make my story better, that helps all of us, right? So the first piece of advice I'd give boils down to this. It all boils down to a good story. We all basically want the same thing. Knowing this should theoretically help you relax. So I know that it can't be easy to be put on the spot by a journalist, particularly if we've got a camera put in your face, a microphone right there, and ask a lot of questions you may not be prepared for or know ahead of time. This can activate a really common fear of public speaking, or at the very least put pressure or stress on you. You could be scrutinizing every word, worried of upsetting your boss, worried about really messing up and becoming a viral internet sensation for all the wrong reasons. But I think a good journalist is going to try to put you at ease, right? So for instance, I try to make some kind of small talk before I get into the questions that I have, or at least like sort of expose some of my own vulnerabilities, right? Like, I don't know what I'm at, and telling you that can put you at ease. Like, I'm not some big journalist coming in, knowing what it's all about, going to be telling some story that you don't know what is going to happen. So small talk helps actually calm me as well, because yes, I still get nervous talking to people too, even after all of these years. But this works both ways. So if you are talking to a reporter, you can start out as they're setting up their camera or as they're asking you if they can interview by like talking about how the event's been going, talking about the weather, asking me how long I've been a reporter. Now I'm just another person you're talking to at an event. So the pressure goes down. And when the pressure goes down, that's going to help you open up. That's going to help, me with my story, because now I'm better able to sort of hear what you're saying without that veneer of stress, right? And the questions I'm going to ask you will be ones you know the answers to. I'm not trying to trick you. I'm not trying to play gotcha. Journalists want a good sentence or two that helps them understand what it is they're at and what it is you're doing. They might ask 17 questions to get there, but ultimately that's what we all want, to give our audiences a good way to understand what this is all about. And a note about those scary cameras, don't even look at them. Seriously, we don't generally want you to do that either. Look right at me, totally ignore it. That'll help take the pressure off too. So my next piece of advice, have a good elevator pitch, 2-sentence summary, whatever you want to call it. Being interviewed is a way to get the word out to the public about what you're doing and why. With that in mind, it's extremely helpful to prepare a little summary. I think Catherine and Sam both talked about this. And I do mean little. Keep it to 2 sentences, or better yet, 1, right? Like, I have a very short memory span. And if you give me that sentence or summary and repeat it maybe once or twice through the interview, that'll really help get it through my brain that, okay, this is the important information. If I've got a camera, right, or if I've got an audio recorder and basically I'm able to take down your exact words, this is less important, as long as you get it once or twice. If I'm just taking notes, and a lot of your smaller newspapers will just be a note-taking person, repeat it maybe more than that. Just make sure that as they're taking notes, they at least get that down one time. We might not use your summary word for word or in a quote for our story, but it will at the very least do wonders to give us that all-important background, and it will set the tone for how the story will come across to readers. Say at the beginning of the interview, whenever it feels right, and at the end, especially when we're asking things like, is there anything else you'd like to add? Even if nothing else gets across, at least you've gotten your main point in there at least twice, right? Third piece of advice, it's okay to be wordy. I can't tell you how many times people fret to me at the end of an interview that they're afraid they spoke too much, went on too long, or gave me way too much background information they know I'll never be able to use. Let me just ease your minds right now. In the journalism world, there is no such thing. In fact, it is literally in my best interest to hear as much as you have to say about the subject I'm asking about. I have nothing else to do. This is literally what I'm getting paid to do right now, is listen to you talk. Feel free to talk. Do not ever feel bad about this. The more information I have, the better I will understand it, and the more informative my story will be. I have conducted interviews that last an hour, transcribed tens of thousands of words, and then written a couple paragraphs. It's my job to distill all of that down, not yours. So if you think mid-sentence that you might be rambling, I want you to take this to heart. This might be the only place where rambling is encouraged. In fact, the worst interviews I've ever done are the ones who give me one-word answers. It just means I have to work 10 times as hard to overcome it, either by asking a lot more questions or working even harder to put someone's worried mind at ease. You are actually doing me a favor by going along. Fourth piece of advice, and this was also mentioned by Catherine and Sam. Find me a second source if you can. I tend to want to talk to at least 2 or more people per story. It's just good journalistic practice to not just interview one person. So you won't be the only one I'm interviewing. This is the part where I tell you how lazy journalists can be. If I get done interviewing you and you know of someone else I can speak to, I will generally take you up on that offer. A few things to keep in mind. I don't want my second source to be a duplicate you. Maybe you're the head of your organization. Don't give me your deputy who's just going to say the same things you did. So here are some possibilities for a good second source. Someone at your event who has a really good reason for being there, or an interesting lived perspective, maybe related to your mission, or just an exuberant attendee who you know will be good for a soundbite or quote. Point out this person after our interview and tell me why you think they'd be a good voice for our story. I might not end up interviewing them, but I'll always appreciate the gesture. And finally, exchange business cards. I've been a professional journalist for 16 years and counting. I've done interviews alongside reporters fresh on the job. Both of us at the end of the day will try to get the story right. But if we get back to that office and find that we didn't get that crucial piece of information, we can do one or 2 ethical things. Ignore that piece of information entirely and risk our audiences not getting the full picture, or try and get it from you at the last minute. So if you've got a business card, or you can give me a good contact phone number or email on the spot, one that would also work after hours, you drastically increase the chances of the much better option number 2, the one where I get my last question answered and the story is all the better for it. And if I don't offer it to you, ask for my business card or contact information as well. That way, after the interview is over and you remember some crucial piece of information on your own, you can always email it off to me. And yes, you can ask me when the story is expected to run, and you can ask me whether I can send you the link when it does. There are a few, I wanted to call these do's or don'ts, but they're kind of just like pro tips. So on and off the record was already talked about, but I'll just sort of reiterate it, that you should always assume that anything you say to a journalist who is there in a working capacity, not if you just meet me like at a restaurant or something, working capacity, assume that what you're telling them is on the record, unless you explicitly tell me that what you are saying is off the record. I saw someone posted in the chat that you should always assume that a reporter is going to quote you as off the record, and that they might on the record, and they might not honor off the record. If they're not honoring off the record, you should definitely call them on that, because that is a journalistic ethical no-no. If you say off the record first, you have to say it first, and then you tell them something and they still use it, you have a legitimate reason to be aggrieved by that. And you should definitely call them out on that, because they shouldn't be doing it. At the very least, shame them on social media so that we all know who they are. But anyway, trying to walk certain comments back. So like if you say something to me and then later on you're like, I shouldn't have said that. And then you tell me, by the way, that comment was off the record. That's a no-no. Some journalists might honor it, but you can't always be sure. So say off the record first if you plan to be talking off the cuff. It's also helpful to let me know when you're back on the record. Most people will say an off the record comment, but then their next statement is on the record. It's a gray area I would rather not guess on. So please just tell me when you're back on the record. Mostly, I don't want to hear a ton of off the record comments anyway. If you're not allowed to say something a certain way, maybe find ways to say it more diplomatically beforehand, or find me a secondary source that can say it on the record. And previewing the story. Most journalists cannot send you the story prior to publication. The reason for this is because you'll be tempted to zhuzh your quotes to make you sound better, to highlight things you think I should have highlighted, or make other edits. That sort of scrutiny is called public relations, not news. And I won't put my judgments on PR here, except to say that each have their place, but are very different for a reason. Sometimes if you're worried, my editor might let me send you the quotes I plan to use in the article, but keep in mind that this is not so you can edit them. It's more as an FYI heads up. Again, not every news organization allows this. I know people do this because they're worried about what they said and how the story will play. That's totally understandable. You can always ask a journalist what they plan to write about and who they plan or already did interview. And you can also search a journalist's previous stories, like Sam and Catherine were talking about, to get a sense of their style and how they write. Both of these things will put your mind at ease. Finally, it's important to remember we're local journalists and you're local activists, and those two things are not necessarily at odds. What connects us more than media and politicians is that local community. We're all doing what we do in order to bring more awareness and information to our community, of which we are all a part. Lifting that community up is ultimately our shared goal. And on my most optimistic days, I'm convinced we'll get there by working together. So thank you so much for having me. And I would be delighted to answer any of your questions. You can put them in the chat or you can just call them out.
Awesome. Amie, thank you so much for all that great advice. Just so y'all all know, just can you go back to that other slide real quick, Ivy? If you need, support and assistance. If you need any help with getting, prepared for an interview, getting messaging material, if we don't have a message guide up, or the group that you're using doesn't have talking points and you want to ask us, please reach out. Our information is all there for the executive director, our press team, our digital team, our messaging director, partnerships director, and me, your organizer. So, please feel free to reach out to us and ask for those materials or assistance. We are really happy to help get out and amplify those strong messages. We can go to the next slide now. And so we're going to keep this up, and it's time for questions and answers. And so at this point, we are going to stop recording.